Hello friends, welcome to Serial Killer Saturday. If you are new to my channel, my name is Hazy Baby. This is a crochet and crime channel where I crochet while talking about crime. And if you haven't seen my videos, please go back and have a look. I'm amazing, if I do say so myself. Anywho, today is Saturday, like I said, the 22nd of April, and today we're talking about crochet and crime, but specifically serial killers, Australian serial killers. Actually, last Saturday I did 5 serial killers. It was a long video. Today I'm going to do another 5 serial killers, Australian serial killers. And yeah, so if you haven't already, subscribe, like, follow, and if you didn't know, I'm also doing a crochet along. So if you're on TikTok, look for the videos. Morning peeps, or whatever time of day it is for you when you're watching this video, or you know, when my internet has decided to play along and upload it properly. So yes, good morning, good evening, good night, just have a good day. Today I am working on Evie still, but look how big she is. She is foldable. Look at that nice little fold she has there. Oh, I love your folds, Evie. No, that sounded sexual. Anyway, so today we're working on the 12 squares that will be going either end of Evie. So yep, I am just adding this border here around. I've already done 2, did them last night. As you can see, she's looking lovely. And then after this, we're going to turn her into a square. So there'll be lots of them. But I have a nice little pile here. And today, like I said, is Serial Killer Saturday. Just get myself situated, nice and comfy. Serial Killer Saturday, and I'm going to be talking about 5 of Australia's most notorious serial killers. And I'll be doing this every Saturday. So, yay for you. You get to be part of that. How cool is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're going to pop in there, right there. We're going to add in. Okay. Alrighty, if you are interested in my crochet, like you're here for the actual crochet part, I'm doing a crochet along, which I will upload the video tomorrow. But if you are impatient, you can go over to my Hazy Baby, so crochet _ and _ crime. Sorry, what is it? Sorry, it's Hazy _ baby, whatever it is. You'll find me. It's just look for me. You'll see. Just go on TikTok, look for crochet and crime. Type in the hashtag crochet along with Hazy Baby, all lowercase, all one word, crochet along with Hazy Baby, and you'll see the videos. Alrighty, so I'm just chopped in there. Okay, so the 5 killers that I'll be talking about today are Leonard Fraser, who was born in Ingham, and Leonard spent 20 years life in prison on sex crimes before he was freed and turned into a murderer. Thomas Jeffries, his name might not be familiar now, but at the time of his crimes, it made him one of the most feared people on the continent. And then John Wayne Glover, who over a 13-month period in March 1989, at 4 pie salesman John Wayne Glover killed 6 elderly women at Sydney's affluent harbourside. And then we're going to talk about Ivan Milat. And unless you were born under a rock and stayed under there, you'll know who Ivan is, but he's one of Australia's and the world's most notorious killers. Ivan Milat was sentenced to life terms for murdering 7 backpackers in New South Wales, Blangallow State Forest between 1989 and 1992. And then the very last one we're going to be talking today about is the Snowtown Killers, or the Snowtown Murders. And their case in Australian history exposed the sordid killing club of 4 men in Adelaide that put a tiny South Australian town on the world map for all the wrong reasons. They're also known as the body in a barrel murders. So, where shall we start? Let's start with Leonard, like I said. So, a little bit more information about Leonard. So Leonard Fraser, like I said, was born in Ingham in Queensland and spent 20 years in prison before he was freed and turned into a murderer. So like I said, he was first convicted over the abduction and murder of 9-year-old Kira Steinhardt in Rockhampton in Queensland in 1999. While in prison, he was tried for more murders. So they decided, you know, he committed way more murders than they even knew, and he was tried for those. In 2003, he was sentenced to further life terms in separate killings of Beverly Lego, Stella Bentelli, and Julia Turner. And he died in prison in 2007, I think. Yeah, he was a sexual predator of the worst kind. So let me talk a little bit more about his victims. So with the serial killer cases, I tried to talk more about their victims than the actual killer because I think they've got enough references. So I try and look up as much of the information as I can. But this is pretty much a short one since I'm not really keen on him at all. Not that I'm keen on any serial killer, but I'm just not keen on talking about Fraser, to be honest. Okay, so before our life sentence on the 7th of September 2000 for the abduction, rape and murder of 9-year-old Kenra Steinhardt in Rockhampton, Queensland, Leonard Fraser had spent almost 20 years of his preceding 22 years behind bars for the rape of a woman. So he raped a woman and he was sentenced to 22 years and he did 20 years. So this is one of those things where I'm like, see, a leopard doesn't change its spots kind of thing, which is absolutely horrible. And he raped a terminally ill cancer patient with whom he'd been living with in the early 1997. So, yeah, typical predator, waited for her to not be able to fight back, and then, yeah, like her life wasn't already going pretty shit. Poor darling. Anyway, we'll move on from that. So Fraser originally confessed to the 5 murders in an apparent deal with the police to avoid general population in prison. So he admitted to these murders so that he would be excluded from Gen Pop, which he was concerned that he would be that he would be murdered in general pop for his crimes that he committed against a 9-year-old girl. So he was a coward as well. One of the victims was a 14-year-old Natasha Ryan, who was found to be alive and living secretly with her boyfriend in a nearby town after being listed as a missing person for 5 years. Although there was an obvious inconsistency with his confession, his defense did not file a mistrial, nor did his defense object to the prosecution using the same confession made in custody, which included Ryan's confession of 3 other victims whose remains were found. The Ryan murder was also based on testimony from fellow prisoners who alleged that Fraser drew detailed maps showing them where Ms. Ryan's remains could be located. The judge in the case, Justice Brian Ambrose, heavily criticised the media for commenting on the value of the confession of the crimes made under police duress or their other prisoners while in custody, which might have affected the trial. And I agree. Like, he confessed, he drew detailed maps. Regardless of the witnesses he chose to give this information to, he should be convicted of his crimes. He clearly did it. I mean, other than the killer, who would know where a person's body was? No one, exactly. So, except for the killer. So, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, yeah, he did it. But he's dead now, so I'm happy about that. Yay, he's dead. He died on January 1st in 2007, and he was known as the Rockhampton Rapist. So sucked in, asshole. Okay. Yeah. All in all, he ended up getting 5 lifetime imprisonment sentences at 25 years each. So I think that means that even after he dies, he gets buried there. And his body is not released until he has finished serving his sentence. Australia is weird. But I actually like it. I kind of really like that, actually. There is like some murderers' bodies in, you know, prisons all over that just have to stay in the cemetery there until they have finished their sentence. So even your bones don't get allowed out. I like it. I like it a lot. Where do their bones go afterwards? Like, because obviously their families would be much dead. And if they aren't, they wouldn't want anything to do with them, right? Anyway, moving on to our next one. This is probably the oldest one I could find. So this is Thomas Jeffries. And his name, like I said, his name might not be familiar, but at the time of his crimes, it made him the most feared person on the continent. So long before Australia's federation in late 1825, fun facts, British convict Thomas Jefferson murdered 6 people on the idyllic island of Tasmania. Well, it was later called Tasmania. At the time, it was called Van Diemen's Land. Fitting name. Yeah, anyway, he escaped from prison because that's all Tasmania was at that time. It was just a giant prison colony. And after escaping from prison, the bushranger and other escapees went on a robbing and killing spree that lasted more than 3 weeks. However, Jeffries also killed the people that he robbed with. So he killed them, and a baby and a policeman. He was a violent sexual offender, and he was captured in January 23rd in 1826 and executed by hanging in jail. So I think he paid for his crimes. I mean, he did kill a baby, so you suck. So let's give a little bit more background of Thomas. So Thomas was a bushranger, murderer, and most importantly, a cannibal. Yes, you heard that correctly. So he actually ate the people that he broke out with. So he broke out of prison with a bunch of people, and he ate them because he was really hungry. It was like 1825. There was no shops and shit. And Tasmania was pretty much just, you know, native First Island people, which duh, leave them alone, otherwise they will eat you. Anyway, he was a contemporary newspaper reports that his crimes were frequently described as a monster. Jeffrey and 3 other convicts absconded from custody in Longston prison, in Van Diemen's Land, now Tasmania. And, he was responsible for 5 murders, characterized by extremely violent, including the killing of a 5-month-old infant. Another victim was a member of a gang, killed while he slept, and his flesh was consumed by his companions. So Jeffrey was captured, I love that his name's Jeffrey, was captured in January 1826, and he was tried at Hobart and convicted of the various crimes. Jeffrey was, like I said, executed by hanging in Hobart in May of 1826, apparently. So basically how his story goes is he was already in prison for the murder of a infant. So he was originally from England. He was exported to Van Diemen's Land as like part of this extradition thing that the English had going on, where they were trying to colonize a whole bunch of places, and they sent a bunch of convicts to, you know, Australia, America, Tasmania, some of the islands. Anyway, the first colony over there was purely a convict colony, and he was in a prison over there. So Van Diemen's Land at the time, or Tasmania as it is known now, was quite a rugged terrain, which it still is. And didn't really have a lot going on. So if you didn't know what you were doing, you honestly would die out there. So basically him and 4 other people escaped, and one at a time he convinced the other people in his group to murder them in their sleep, and then he ate them, him being the lone survivor. I know, charming, isn't it? And yeah, so that is him, and he was Australia's first cannibal and Australia's first serial killer. Although I would actually argue that he was New Zealand's and England's, because he was English and he just happened to be in New Zealand. But I will take that from our cousins, as Australians often do, and claim it as our own, because we love to claim New Zealand stuff as ours. But that's okay, because we're like siblings, you know? We just tease each other a lot, steal each other's stuff, claim each other's stuff as ours. We do that. That's what we do. And by we, I mean Australians do that. I haven't actually heard a New Zealand person claiming stuff. But yeah, like I said, we're brothers in arms still to this very day, and we're kind of like the same country, basically. It's just they're like our cousin country or our brother country or our sister country. Well, that's how I see them anyway. So all my New Zealand friends, I love you. I love you so much. I love you like a cousin, like a sister, like a brother. And trust me, my best friend is my cousin, so you want to be my best friend. All right, we'll move on from Frasier, because like it's so old, but still, it's amazing. Next on our hit list, see what I did there, is John Wayne Glover. So over 13 months, beginning in March of 1989, the 4 and 20 salesman John Wayne Glover killed 6 elderly women in Sydney, in the harbour side of Mossman, earning him the moniker the Granny Killer, apparently. So his first victim was Gwendolyn Mitchell-Leany, I think is how you say it, but I'm just going to call it Grandma Gwen, who he sneaked up behind when she entered her apartment, and then he hit her in the back of the head with a hammer and stole money from her purse. I mean, what a joke. In his subsequent murders, Glover usually attacked his victim with a hammer before removing their pantyhose and strangling them with the undergarment. He had come to the attention of the police over a string of nursing home assaults that he had also been committing at the same time. So he had a real issue with elderly women, obviously, since he was robbing them and murdering them. So when he was asked to attend a police interview, he attempted suicide, and wrote a note. And in the note he had written, he said, "No more grannies," leading to his arrest over the murders. But before his arrest, he would kill one more, and he was sentenced to a multiple life prison terms. But he hung himself in jail in 2005, and really no one should be shocked by that. He did try and unalive himself previously, but yeah, he hung himself in jail. So what a true coward that one is. But let's learn a little bit more about him. Let's see what else I can find. I can dig up, if you will. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see what else I can dig up. Okay. Alrighty, so we have a few things here that he did. So let's see. Sorry, I'm making this very long out and drawn out. So he was convicted of the murders of Gwendolyn Mitchelton, I think that's how you say her name, Lady Winfred Isabel Ashton, Margaret Polford, Olive Cleveland, Morel Falcone, and Joan Sinclair. So he, on March 1st in 1989, as Glover left his Mossman RSL on Millery Road, he saw 82-year-old Gwendolyn walking down the street. Glover returned to his car and put a hammer under his belt. He then followed Gwendolyn to the entry of her foyer on Military Road apartment building. As she went to open the front door, he hit her in the hammer with in the back of her head, and then he continued to strike her head and about her body. So several of her ribs were broken, obviously, and Glover fled the scene, taking her purse that only contained a mere $100, which is like nothing. Gwendolyn was still alive when she was found by two schoolboys, but died shortly after, and after the police and an ambulance arrived. Because she was a little old lady and she was fragile, man. Super duper fragile. You can't be smacked in the head a few times, that's for sure. Alrighty, and then I'm going to move on to Lady Winifred. So on May 9th, 1989, Glover was walking along Military Road again, same road, when he saw 84-year-old lady, we're just going to call her lady because she's a lady, a widow English-Australian, and an impersonation artist of William Ashton, walking towards him. She was on her way home in nearby Raglan Street, and Glover put on a pair of gloves and followed her into the foyer of her apartment. So I think we can see his MO, where he attacked her with a hammer. He then threw her on the ground and dragged her into the rubbish alcove, where he repeatedly hit her in the head in the pavement. Glover recalled that she almost overpowered him until he fell on top of her. She almost made it. And he started to hit her in the head on the pavement. She was knocked unconscious, and Glover removed her pantyhose and strangled her. He then placed her walking stick and shoes at her feet, and then he stole her purse, which again only contained $100, and he returned to the RSL while sirens were blaring outside. So what a lovely human, isn't he? Isn't he lovely? He's so lovely. Yeah, I know, I'm being sarcastic again. But, you know, it's quite horrible. So that's that one. So his further offences were on the 6th of June 1989, Glover molested 77-year-old Mosley at Wesley's Gardens retirement home in Belrose. On the 24th of June in 1989, Glover visited Caroline Krish Holmes nursing home in Lane Cove, where he lifted a dress of an elderly patient and fondled her buttocks. In a neighbouring room, he slid his hand down the front of another patient's dress gown and stroked her breasts. The woman cried out for help, and he was briefly questioned before he was let go. So, yeah, that goes to show how important they are. So on the 8th of August in 1989, he assaulted elderly Elfie Carmel on the back street of Lingford on Sydney's Upper North Shore. On the 8th of October, Glover pretended to be a doctor and ran his hand up the dress of Phyllis McNeil, another patient at another nursing home. And on the 18th of October in 1989, so same year, Glover followed 86-year-old widow Doris Cox along Split Road in Morsman to her retirement village, where in a secluded stairwell at the front of the house, he attacked her, ramming her face into the brick wall until she fell. And although she survived the assault, she was not able to provide a clear description or recollection of the events. So I'm just glad she didn't die, to be honest, since he had a thing about killing elderly ladies. So I forgot what I was doing for a second there, so while I was reading that list, but that's okay. So his next victim was Margaret Poholt, and on the 2nd of November in 1989, Glover approached the 78-year-old on Love Lane and did the whole same thing again, hammer, all that jazz. This time, however, he absconded with $300. Whoa. Which back then was actually a lot of money, but still, like, surely her life is worth more than that. And then Olive Cleveland, within 24 hours of the previous murder, on the 3rd of November in 1989, he cornered 81-year-old Olive Cleveland, and she became the 4th woman to now be killed, what was known as the Granny Killer. So he was not a nice person. His last victim was Morelle Falconer, and she died on the 23rd of November 1989. She was aged 93. She was his oldest victim, and he absconded with $100. So that guy is a peach. Isn't he a peach? So I'm glad he hung himself. What a douche. Anyway, moving on. Ivan Milat. So Ivan Milat is well known. There are lots of documentaries on him, but he is one of Australia's and the world's, it's a shitty thing to be known for, notorious killers. So Ivan Milat was sentenced to life terms for all of his murders of 7 backpackers in New South Wales, Belangolo State Forest between 1989 and 1992. So the travellers, which included 5 women and 2 men, came from Australia, England and Germany. It's believed that Milat picked up his victims as hitchhikers before driving them deep into the forest and tying them up and either stabbing them or shooting them to death, or both sometimes. He then took all of their belongings with him. He took his time with the killings. He decapitated one victim and her head has never been found. And police investigating Milat said that his name kept coming up in tips and under police suspicion. And he was known as a gun-loving person. So I know that doesn't sound very strange to my American friends, my American viewers, but in Australia that is super, super strange that he is gun-loving, because we don't have many of those gun-loving people anymore. So yeah, he was arrested after an English backpacker called Paul Onions, who escaped Milat during a quote-unquote robbery, identified Milat as his abductor. Milat was arrested on May 22nd in 1994, and a search of his Western Sydney property yielded a trove of evidence, including part of the rifle used in the murders and all of the murdered backpackers' property, well, most of them. Ivan died of cancer recently, actually, in 2019. At the age of 74, he died in prison. So the Australian government paid for him to live for years after he murdered people. Isn't that nice? Aren't we a nice country? Okay, so let's learn a little bit more about Ivan's victims. I don't care about Ivan or his background. I just care about his victims. So, in 1989, on the 30th of December, Australian Deborah Everest and James Gibson, both 19, left Melbourne. The couple first went to Sydney, where they stayed in a backpacker hostel in the inner city suburbs before checking out. They were last seen heading to Confest and planning to hitchhike to Albury, which is in on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. A day after they were last seen, a bushwalker found Gibson's camera by the road of Gladstone's George in northern Sydney. The person took the damaged camera home and only reported it when Gibson's empty backpack was found in the same area a month later and was linked to the couple's missing persons report. Both were found in the Belangolo State Forest on the 5th of October in 1993. They had been stabbed repeatedly and their bodies mutilated. So that was his first spout of killings. So he killed 2 people in this incident and a couple. I think that's what scared everyone the most, is that he killed couples. He killed, it was because, you know, you assume that if you're with your husband or your partner or whatever, if you're with somebody, you're safer. And statistically speaking, there is safety in numbers. But obviously Ivan didn't give a shit, and he must have used the love for each other against them. Let's say that's what he did. So in 1991, on January 20th, German Simone Schmidt, 20, was set off for a hitchhike from Sydney. She told acquaintances that she was off to Melbourne to meet her mother, who was flying in from Germany, to join her for a camping holiday. That's nice of her mum. She was last seen at the train station preparing to leave for the Western Sydney, where she was attempting to hitchhike. On the 1st of November in 1993, Schmidt's body was found again in the Belanglo State Forest. She died suffering from numerous stab wounds, which actually went through her entire spinal column. So she was stabbed so viciously that it went through her spinal column. So in the same year, but at the end of the year, on the 26th of December, so Boxing Day, German backpacker Gabor, I think is how you say his name, 21, and Anya, 20, left the backpackers in King's Cross. Now, if you live in Sydney, you know King's Cross is shady. And they hitchhiked to Adelaide and Darwin. That was their plan anyway. So on the 4th of November in 1993, both were found, so 2 years later, both were found again in the Belanglo State Forest, where they were determined that they had been bound, shot 6 times, while his partner had been beheaded. So one of them was shot 6 times, which is definitely overkill, and then the other one was completely beheaded, and they haven't found Anya's head. Her head has been missing, and I don't think they'll ever find it. I don't know what he did with it, but I am super, super sad about that. So that is another 3 people that he's murdered, and then we move to 1992. So in 1992, on the 18th of April, British citizen Joanna Walters, 22, and Caroline Clark, 21, left King's Cross. Again, shady place. Don't go to King's Cross. Go to King's Cross, but the one time I went, someone was murdered, so that's why I'm tainted. I'm tainted from King's Cross forever. Anyway, so they left King's Cross to hitchhike together around Australia, and they were headed for Victoria to pick fruit and, make some money. And then they were going to go to Wollongong. So a lot of backpackers here in Australia, they do the whole fruit picking thing. They just go where whatever's seasonal, and they pick fruit, or they help with the sugarcane fields up here in the tropics, and they do stuff like that. Anyway, they were reportedly asked for directions to the Hume Highway, and on the 19th of September 1992, both were found in the Belanglo State Forest. Walters had been stabbed, and Clark had been shot 10 times. So, like I said, he has a tendency to do the whole overkill thing. He had a tendency to do the whole overkill thing, because he did now. And I really hope his death was very painful. Anyway, so I have a little bit of information about his incarceration and his appeals, and then we'll move on to the next story. So on the first day of in Maitland Jail, he was beaten by another inmate. And almost a year later, on the 16th of May 1997, he made an escape attempt alongside convicted drug dealer and former Sydney councillor George Savas, which I'll talk about in a later video. The plan failed, and Savas was found hung in his cell the next day, and Milat was subsequently transferred to a maximum security prison in a Goulburn Correction Centre. In November in 1997, Milat appealed against his convictions. Oh, you had no hope, buddy. Due to a breach of the common law right to legal representation as established by Dervich versus Queen. However, the New South Wales Court of Appeal dismissed his appeal. Good, because they should have. Milat filed an application to the High Court to be allowed circumstances to be on special leave. on these new grounds, and the application for leave was dismissed. Good. And they went, computer says no. He was allowed... he really badly wanted to leave, but he wasn't allowed to, obviously. And they disallowed any other appeals from him. So they were just like, you know what? Your voice is not heard. Malat's final avenue of appeal was refused in 2006, and 2 other application attempts were rejected as well. So they just kept rejecting them. They're just like, dude, we're not even going to read this. You killed, you murdered people, and and it was over the top bullshit too, mate. So how about now? How about that? So yeah, that's Malat. Which leaves us with the Snowtown murders. So the Snowtown murders, or the Snowtown killers, I've also heard it called. The other thing I've heard it called is the body in a barrel murders. So the worst serial killing cases in Australian history exposed a sordid sort of killing club, because these men who killed these people were under the impression that they were pedophiles. They had convinced themselves, or that's the excuse they used when they were caught. So I'm not sure their psychology behind it, and I wouldn't even want to hazard a guess. But the Snowtown killers, so the worst serial killer case in Australia, like I said. So over 7 years, 11 people were murdered in a sadistic murder spree orchestrated by John Bunting and his old mate, Robert Wagner. So often with the help of their cohorts, Mark Hayden and James Valaguskis. I love that name, Valaguskis. I wish I had it. I say the men targeted homosexuals, they said, and pedophiles. They dismembered 8 of the bodies with saws and dumped them in barrels, which were found in a disused bank vault in Snowtown. So following the arrests of Valaguski, turned witness detailing the graphic and horror of the crimes, Bunting was found guilty of 11 murders, Wagner of 10, and they are serving multiple life sentences. Valaguski is sentenced to 26 years for 4 murders, and Hayden was convicted of assisting in 5 of the murders, and he was sentenced to 25 years. The evidence given at the trial drove us to the conclusion that all of the men are incapable of true retribution, and that's what sentencing judge Brian Martin told Bunting and Wagner. It's not to exaggerate to say that you were in the business of killing for pleasure. So, like I said, the Snowtown murders are also known as the body in the barrel murders, and there are a series of murders committed from 1992 until 1999 in Adelaide. So, let us go. I think because there is so many perpetrators in this case, I'll just give you a quick perusal of their background. So, John Justin Bunting, who was born in September 1966 in Inala in Queensland, was found to be the leader of these perpetrators. When he was 8 years old, Bunting was beaten and sexually assaulted by a friend's older brother. He reported to have enjoyed weaponry, photography, and anatomy, and grew up to develop a strong hatred, which, who could blame him, for pedophiles and homosexuals, because he was under the impression that because he was molested by a boy, that meant that that boy was a pedophile, that it was a homosexual, which is not the case. Just saying, it's not the case. And he felt really bad about himself, kind of feeling like he deserved it or some stuff. Anyway, that's what the psychology bits of this says. So Bunting worked at an abattoir and reportedly bragged about slaughtering the animals, saying that was what he enjoyed the most. And Bunting moved to a house in Salisbury's North in South Australia in 1991 and befriended his neighbour, Mark Hayden and Robert Wagner. So let's move on to them. Robert Joe Wagner was born on the 24th of December in 1979. And he was born in Parramatta in New South Wales, and he befriended Bunting in 1991. Bunting encouraged Wagner to assist in various murders after he convinced him that the perpetrators were either homosexual or pedophiles or both, even though none of these men had proof. And so James Vygotsky, the one that I like the name of, I'm just going to call him James, was born on December 24th in 1979. Along with his mother and half-brother, they lived with Bunting, and graduation drew into helping him with murders. So Vygotsky was 23, helped torture and kill his own half-brother, Troy Yold. Nice. Okay. And his stepbrother, David Johnson. He confessed in 2001 to 4 murders, including Johnson, and became a key witness for the Crown. So he was a turncoat as well. Good on you. The details he provided, supported by other evidence, helped convict Bunting and Wagner. Vygotsky's mother also knew about the murders, apparently, and with Bunting's encouragement, assisted in one of them. Once Bunting, Wagner, and Vygotsky and Hayden had been taken into custody, she actually died of cancer. So that's why she wasn't imprisoned, because she died of cancer. But let's just say I don't think she should have been imprisoned. She was obviously distraught and thought she was helping her son. So the last one is Mark Ray Hayden, who was born in 1958 on December 4th and associated with Bunting, was initially the suspect of the superstition orders of a stationary person prohibited production, and could not therefore be identified as an alleged perpetrator. So in January of 1999, he reportedly rented out an abandoned state bank. So this is where they dumped the barrels. Building in Snowtown. A jury deadlocked on the murders of Hayden's wife, Elizabeth Hayden, and Troy Yule. The murder charges were not retried when Hayden pled guilty to helping the serial killers dispose of the bodies of Elizabeth and Yule. Jodie Elliott, the sister of Hayden's wife, Elizabeth Hayden, was a woman with below average intelligence and had become besotted with Bunting. And to receive her Social Security income, she pretended to be Suzanne Allen, a deceased former acquaintance of Bunting's. Frederick Brooks and Elliott's son were later killed in the group. So they just killed everyone, apparently. They just went on a giant murder spree and killed anyone who had wronged them, and then claimed later that their reasoning was they were either a pedophile or homosexual. Which justified in their minds the murder of these people. So, yeah, as you can tell, because there's a lot going on here, seems to be a lot of people doing a lot of badness in this case. So let's learn a little bit more about the murders. So the victims were chosen at random by Bunting, who imagined some sort of infraction. Some victims were murdered by Bunting because he suspected them for being a pedophile based on very flimsy evidence, such as rumours, and others were killed because he disliked obese people, drug users, and or because they were homosexual. Most of the victims were friends or acquaintances of at least one member of Bunting's group. Some were family members, occasionally sharing residences with one of the murderers, and were befriended for a short time and pulled into the group as easy targets for Bunting. So, like I said, this guy is just, I think he was the ringleader, and the others were just following along with him for fear of being murdered themselves, especially if they were like adding them into the group. So as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 left, and I'll be doing those off camera. And I thank you very much, because that is the end of our Serial Killer Saturday. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your patience. And I hope to see you tomorrow. Like I said, if you haven't already liked and subscribed to my channel, please do. yeah, I really enjoy doing these, and I do these not for money, obviously, because I don't have any, but for the love of crochet and for the love of talking about crime. So if you are enjoying this channel, please help me stay afloat and like and subscribe. If you can go over to my TikTok channel and like over there, that would be great. I'm actually going to go live in a minute and finish off these. So I'll upload this and then I'll wait a little bit and then I'll go live and finish these up. So if you want to go see me over on live, you can find me under Hazy Baby, Crochet and Crime. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.